What is GBV and how well do you know its vocabulary? Well enough? Fair enough? Or you're barely woke? Whatever level you fall under, something is about to change, for the better of course. GBV is gender-based violence, an umbrella term for any harm that is perpetrated against the person's will, resulting from power inequities that are based on gender roles. It is also one that's based on socially ascribed gender differences between males and females. It'll interest you to know that GBV is not synonymous for violence against women and girls, even though it is widely recognized that GBV is normally perpetrated against women and girls by men and boys. This acknowledgement of men and boys as the predominant perpetrators of GBV does not exclude them as victims of GBV as well. And even though GBV is often used interchangeably with violence against women, the actual definition encompasses much more. This fluidity of use all over the world, however, speaks to the subordinate role of women in society, which often leaves them as victims. There are many forms of GBV, and most commonly, they are categorized to include sexual violence, sexual exploitation and abuse, domestic violence, economic violence, emotional violence, socio-cultural or psychological violence, etc. Categories of perpetrators may include family members, community members, and/or those acting on behalf of cultural, religious, or state institutions. So having said all that, let's go over some common terms, but keep in mind that some may differ with regards to continental policies or laws. Abuse is any harmful or unlawful treatment or use, often to gain an unfair benefit of some kind. Attitudes are individual views, opinions, or feelings about something. Beliefs, they are firmly held attitudes that are often regarding things like religion, cultural practices, and other major facets of a person's life. Child sexual abuse is any behavior with or without contact that imposes sexual behavior on a child. Consent. This is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. There are many ways to give consent. Consent does not have to be verbal, but verbally agreeing to different sexual activities can help both you and your partner respect each other's boundaries. Consent is about communication, and it should happen every time. Giving consent for one activity one time does not mean giving consent for an increased or recurring sexual contact. For example, agreeing to kiss someone does not give that person permission to remove your clothes. Having sex with someone in the past doesn't give that person permission to have sex with you again in the future. Domestic violence. This is any act or threatened act of violence by a spouse or partner. Domestic violence can include psychological or sexual abuse, economic abuse, emotional, verbal, or psychological abuse, including any conduct that makes another person feel constantly unhappy, humiliated, ridiculed, afraid or depressed, or to feel inadequate or worthless. Harassment, including sexual harassment and intimidation, or conduct that in any way harms or may harm another person, including any omission that results in harm or either endangers the safety, health, or well-being of another person, undermines another person's privacy, integrity, or security, or detracts, or is likely to detract from another person's dignity or worth as a human being. Early marriage. This is when someone marries or is forced to marry under the age of 18. This is often forced by parents or other relatives. Emotional abuse or violence. This is a behavior that seeks to control an individual by inflicting emotional harm, which can include threats, intimidation, humiliation, coercion, etc. and can often lead to or is incorporated with other forms of violence, including domestic and sexual violence. Exploitation. This is the act of taking advantage of something or someone. In particular, the act of taking advantage unjustly over another person for your own benefit. Female genital cutting. This is when healthy vaginal tissue is either nicked, excised, and/or even sewn in relation to secret society rite of passage. Gender. This is the social construction of roles according to whether a person is male or female. It's pliable and varies across cultures, time, and context. Gender is one of several defining socio-cultural characteristics such as ethnicity, religion, and age, which define a person's experience and their opportunities. Human rights. They are universal guarantees protecting individuals and groups against actions that interfere with fundamental freedoms and human dignity. Intimate partner. This includes current or former spouses, that is, legal and common law. Non-marital partners such as boyfriend, girlfriend, same-sex partner, or dating partner. They may or may not be cohabitating, and the relationship need not involve sexual activities. Minor. This is a person under the age of 18, according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Norms. These are the routine behaviors of individuals or groups of people within a society, and these behaviors are what is used to define normal behavior. Oppression. This is an unjust and cruel use of power and authority over individuals or groups. Patriarchy. This is a male-dominant social structure where women are subordinate. Perpetrator. This is a person, group, or institution that directly inflicts or otherwise supports violence or other abuse inflicted on another against his or her will. Power. This is having of control, authority, or influence. Rape. This is forcing a person to have sexual penetration, vaginally, anally, or orally, against their will. Secondary survivor. This is a person impacted by the experience of gender-based violence inflicted upon the survivor. This may include family members or others close to the survivor. Sex. This is the biological difference between men and women. Sexual harassment. This is perpetrating unwanted sexual advances or attention. Status. This is the social and economic standing that a person has in a community in relation to other people. Survivor. This is a person who has experienced violence or other abuse. Violence. This is the use of force or power to harm another person. Violent episode. This is an act or series of acts of violence or abuse by one perpetrator or group of perpetrators. This may involve multiple types of violence, such as physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or social-cultural violence. And this may involve repetition of violence over a period of minutes, hours, or days. Now that you have added knowledge on GBV, please do well to share, for sharing is our communal responsibility.